Prime Minister of Finland, His Excellency Petteri Orpo.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Hyvää huomenta. I am delighted to announce that we have the Prime Minister of Finland, Petteri Orpo, with us today. Dear Prime Minister, dear Petteri, welcome to the European Parliament. Thank you for accepting our invitation to address this House as part of our This is Europe series of debates. Finland is a nation I know well, and one that I can say holds a very special place in my heart. But allow me, on behalf now of all the members of this House, to reiterate the European Parliament's appreciation for Finland's commitment to the European Union over your 30-year membership, to our shared values, and particularly for your support to Ukraine and to our collective security. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your personal leadership and your resolve towards strengthening our European project, for Finland's support to a free and democratic Ukraine, and to commend you on steering Finland towards NATO membership. Having a 1,400-kilometre border with Russia means that Finland is uniquely qualified to lead when it comes to Europe's security and defence. It also means that Finland has faced hybrid threats in recent weeks and months that have put pressure on our systems, and we understand that our security architecture must be able to respond to the level of threat that our way of life is facing. So Finland has benefited from close to €2 billion in recovery and resilience funds that will support Finland's economy in the digital and green transition, and Repower EU Clean Tech funds will continue to support Finland's innovation and businesses on the road to sustainable growth. This is important to underline. And it is important that, as I said in Helsinki last week, as many Finnish citizens as possible continue to help shape the future of Europe and go out to vote in the European Parliament elections on the 9th of June. So, dear Prime Minister, dear Petteri, the floor is yours.
Madam Speaker, dear Roberta, honourable members of the European Parliament, fellow Europeans. It's good to see you, many familiar faces here today. And I'm very happy to be here at the European Parliament, a building I have visited numerous times, previously as a Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Minister of the Interior and Minister of Finance. Today, I stand before you not just as a Prime Minister of Finland, but also a committed European, eager to serve Finland's vision for a resilient, competitive and secure Europe. Now we find ourselves at a key moment in history, one that calls for our courage, unity and determination. We have returned to the very fundamentals of European integration, promoting peace and defending our values. The ongoing war in Ukraine is not just a conflict on our continent's borders. It is a stark reminder of fragility of our peace. It threatens the very principles of which our union was built. As Europeans, it is high time for us to wake up and smell the coffee. This is the defining challenge of our generation and our continent. Finland, which shares a long border, more than 1,300 kilometers with Russia, understands the significance of this moment. Finland has never dropped the ball when it comes to security and defence. After the Cold War, we remained committed to maintaining a credible and independent defence capacity. Our decision to join NATO is not one we took lightly. It was a clear signal of our commitment to European security. Now we are happy to finally welcome our close neighbour Sweden to the alliance. Welcome. The war in Ukraine has been a wake-up call for all of us. We must never again be so reliant on others for our energy and security. We must take care of our own defence. Ramping up our defence industry, improving our preparedness and strengthening our borders are critical pillars of our shared security architecture. We are living in a time where practically all policy fields are linked to our security, and without security, we cannot ensure the prosperous future for Europe. For us in Finland, the EU is the most important political and economic frame of reference and community of values. My government is committed to a strong European Union, an EU that acts, not only reacts. We want to build a union that takes care of our common security and works for our economy. Upholding the rule of law in Europe must remain our core principle. Today I have three main points for the future of Europe and the next mandate. First, we have to strengthen Europe's strategic competitiveness. The reason our economic competitiveness is so crucial, why it is so crucial, it's simple. Europe is falling behind in productivity. Our standard of living is diminishing compared to others. The United States and China are experiencing faster growth and attracting investments. Should this trend persist, we will no longer be able to stand on our own feet. We must build our competitiveness by developing our strengths and through market-based solutions, with a fully functioning internal market at the core. This foundation will enable us to thrive in an increasingly competitive global landscape. We need to cut the bureaucratic red tape, implement sustainable fiscal policies, reform labour market regulation and conclude new trade deals. We must foster innovation and skills, strengthen our internal market and ensure significant funding for innovation and research. These initiatives are the bedrock of long-term competitiveness. There is an immense need to finance our defence and the green transition, as well as broader competitiveness in challenging policy areas like research and innovation. We must also utilise existing instruments more actively. This means reforming the next MFF and seeking more financial resources from the markets, for example through the EIP and by developing the Capital Market Union. We need a true European investment union. It is essential that we make investing in Europe attractive again. The urgency of reverting the state aid rules to the normal framework has become increasingly apparent. The escalation of state aid competition threatens the very core of our single market. Such competition can lead to a race to the bottom, where countries with deeper pockets can unfairly support their domestic industries. The principle of the single market is founded on equal opportunities for all, not a fragmented landscape where walls are built and financial muscle overshadows market dynamics. It is crucial that we restore the normal state aid rules. A healthy single market benefits all European citizens and business, today and in the long term. Jacques Delors, father of the European single market, would indeed be deeply concerned by the current practices regarding the relaxation of state aid rules. The dilution of these rules risks undermining the level playing field Delors works so tirelessly to establish. When it comes to our trade policy, we must refocus on the core principles of trade policy itself. Our setbacks have often stemmed from pursuing broad-ranging agreements with noble intentions and expecting our negotiating partners to commit to them. If we want to be globally relevant, we need a better ability to conclude, ratify and implement trade deals, not better ability to bring them down. The European Union trade policy is not only a vital instrument for boosting competitiveness, it has become crucial in building partnership in today's global landscape. Friends, secondly, we have to improve European comprehensive security. This includes defence and border security, but also preparedness more broadly. Firstly, ramping up our defence industry is priority number one. The European Union has the regulation and the resources, and we need to use those tools. Even as member of NATO, we think that Europe can do a lot. NATO and the EU do not exclude each other. They complement each other. Next on border security, Russia has weaponized migration to put pressure on Finland and the entire EU. Russia is pushing third country nationals towards our eastern land border. This is not acceptable. The numbers are still relatively low, but the phenomenon is worrisome. If we cannot stop this phenomenon now, it will also become a question of numbers and a greater threat to national and European security. Security at the EU's external borders is at the core of the EU's existence. Safeguarding our external front lines against any form of hybrid attacks is crucial. This is why our response has been decisive. We have closed our eastern land border and are in process of preparing new legislation in Finland. We are doing this to protect the entire European Union. A hybrid attack on our border is a hybrid attack against the whole of Europe. Therefore, we need to evaluate our existing European legislation to see whether it is strong enough to tackle these challenges in its current state. If not, then we must consider updating it to better suit the time we are living in. We must send a clear message. Europe is resolute in its defence, agile in its response, and firm in its commitment to the safety of its borders. In addressing the security of our borders, we must also focus on the people who live in these critical areas. Tourism and all cross-border trade has stopped indefinitely. The vitality of the EU's external border regions is crucial, not just for national security, but for the cohesion of our society. The war has caused the economic base in these border areas to decline. This trend, if unchanged, will lead to depopulation and pose a grave risk to the security and stability of our Union. It is necessary that we implement EU-level policies aimed at revitalising these areas and making them more secure against external threats. When on preparedness, preparedness for crises is one of the cornerstones of security. The EU and its member states must be better prepared for a growing number of increasingly complex crises. As we have learned from the COVID-19 crisis, the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis. It is in everyone's interest to improve the level of preparedness of all member states and the EU as a whole. In this context, of preparedness, Finland stands ready to share our experiences of resilience and readiness. Our nation has long been recognized as a superpower in preparedness. It is a status born out of necessity and reinforced by our history and geopolitical position. We have developed comprehensive strategies that cover all sectors of society, from public to private. Our approach to preparedness includes not only physical defences, but also societal resilience, which is critical in facing both conventional and hybrid threats. I believe Finland's model of preparedness could offer valuable lessons for the European Union. By adopting similar comprehensive and forward-thinking strategies, we can enhance the resilience of the entire Union. This is why we asked the Commission to develop and publish the first EU strategy for preparedness union. This should be based on the whole of society approach, where the needs and contributions of all political sectors are taken into account. We are not suggesting another policy document. We are calling for an innovative blueprint that ensures that the European Union's resilience in the face of complex challenges. Our third priority has to do with the environment and climate. With the right kind of climate policy, we can strengthen our security of supply, boost our economies and improve the supply of European raw materials. The government of Finland is committed to reaching the climate goals. We think that while tackling climate change, we can also create jobs and phase out fossil fuels. We have technology and know-how for this here in Europe. We must emphasize a clean transition that leverages the bioeconomy and circular economy. With clean energy in the form of nuclear power, wind power, solar power, hydrogen and biomass, we will attract industry that can produce and export these clean solutions. We should combat climate change and support biodiversity in a way that recognizes the diverse circumstances across the member states. A technology-neutral, cost-effective, clean transition will pave the way for sustainable growth. The bioeconomy and renewable natural resources are our allies in reducing emissions and diminishing harmful dependencies on third countries. As we look towards the next legislative term, it is important to admit that our environmental and climate goals cannot be achieved through more regulation alone. Regulation has been necessary and will continue to be, but our approach thus far has focused too much on details, losing sight of the broader picture. We must have proper impact assessments. In the upcoming term, we must recalibrate our climate policy and shift away from overly detailed regulation to fostering innovation. We need carrots and incentives, no sticks and bureaucracy. Thank you. As I approach the end of my speech, I will turn back to the situation in Ukraine. I say it is our job as leaders to fight against any pessimism and show an example and leadership. Everyone has to wake up. Russia continues to commit war crimes in Ukraine. It has shifted to a war economy. Russia is evidently preparing for a long conflict with the West and represents a permanent and essential military threat to Europe. If we, as united Europe, fail to respond sufficiently to this challenge, the coming years will be filled with danger and the looming threat of attack. We must boost our support to Ukraine now for it to win this war and at the same time enhance our own defence capabilities and the ability to defend ourselves. It is also essential that we offer a credible European path forward for Ukraine. Enlargement of the EU is a geopolitical necessity and a question of security. Ukraine has demonstrated its ability to defend itself, and the Ukrainian people's resolve remains high. Their resilience and determination pose a significant challenge to Russian interests. Supporting Ukraine is not only a moral imperative, but also a strategic necessity. The cost of Russian military success would far exceed the investment required to support Ukraine. Imagine what will happen next if Russia succeeds. I say that every euro spent on Ukraine today is a low price compared to the alternative costs if Russia wins. We have already taken significant steps, but more must be done. Ukraine is fighting, and we have the resources to support it. Ukraine deserves a just and lasting peace on its own terms. Securing the agreement on the EU's Ukraine facility among all 27 member states was crucial. Next, we need to deliver an ammunition production and agree on an additional funding for the European Peace Facility and Ukraine Assistance Fund as quickly as possible. Finland is doing its share. We have increased our ammunition production, and I urge all member states to do the same. Because it is crucial to recognize that Russia's military capabilities are limited, despite its attempts to hide this fact. Russia is not invincible. We can overcome this challenge if we pool our resources together. We have the financial means. Now we need to demonstrate our political commitment. Self-satisfaction is no longer an option. Our collective future depends on our ability to recognize and counteract the threats posed by an aggressive and militarist Russia. Strengthening our defence is not just a matter of national security. It is a precondition for preserving the peace and stability that have long been the hallmarks of European integration and prosperity. In this light, we have to amplify the European Investment Bank's engagement in security and defence financing. Recognising the EIB's pivotal role in investment financing and as the EU's lending arm, there is an urgent call to extend these capabilities beyond dual-use projects, especially in response to the growing demands within the European security and defence sectors. Friends, more Europe doesn't and shouldn't mean less America. The United States is and will be our most important ally, and we must strengthen our transatlantic links in both defence and trade. Dear friends, let us leave this hemicycle today with a clear resolve to strengthen our union, to secure our borders, and to support our friends in need with more than just words. Our actions today will define the legacy of our generation and shape the course of history. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And now we will start first with the group representatives, starting with Manfred Weber, President of the EPP Group. 4 minutes.
Madam President, Madam Vice President, dear Prime Minister, dear Petteri, First of all, thank you for addressing the European Parliament. As an EPP Group leader, I want to congratulate you for the trust you received by the Finnish people for being elected as Prime Minister, and after your success, Alexander Stubb was elected as President of Finland, so it's in good, safe EPP hands today, thanks to the trust of the Finnish people. Finland is a true European success story, and also an EPP success story. The first country in Europe to introduce a universal election law for parliamentary elections in 1996. In 1997, when women had no voting rights in most of Europe, there were already 19 members in the Finnish parliament, women, female members in the Finnish parliament. Since gaining independence in 1917, Finland has made an incredible journey. From being one of the poorest countries in Europe, it has become one of the most successful. And today, Finland is a European leader in gender equality, in climate policy and innovation. Probably it has something to do with sisu, the special determination that defines the Finnish national character. And dear Petteri, you and Kokoomus have definitely shown some special determination in always standing up for Finland's accession to NATO. The Finnish Socialists and Greens changed their minds about joining NATO only after the invasion of Ukraine, while already in 2018 you were warning Europe, I quote you, "The crisis in Ukraine, recent terrorist attacks and hybrid threats have shown that both the EU defence cooperation and NATO are needed and that they can complement each other." Quote end. That's really true EPP leadership. Finland makes both NATO and the European defence stronger. Not only you bring the strongest artillery in Western Europe, an army capable of fighting in -40 degrees, but also the experience of guarding Europe's longest border with Russia. Finns know what it means to have Russians as neighbours. Like the Ukrainians, you fought in cold trenches and frozen forests to stay free. The only difference is that you stood up to Stalin alone, whereas today we stand together against Putin. This means not only supporting Ukraine as long as it takes, but also stopping Putin's hybrid warfare against the Finnish border, as you said. Finland also is currently building up a fence to protect our external border. We as EPP do what is necessary to do. And dear Petteri, the Finnish border is a European border, as you said. The Finnish border is a NATO border. No dictator can use illegal migration as a weapon to blackmail us as Europeans. Standing together always means to build up also competitive Europe. And when it comes to innovation, the Finns are hard to beat. Finland is today world leader in digital infrastructure, the first country in Europe to build up a 5G network and is already to implement into 6G. Finland, Europe's forests, has made innovation the basic of its climate policy. Companies are investing currently 200 billion euros, 70% of Finland's GDP, in our green transition. Almost 1 in 3 Finnish employees works directly or indirectly in the tech sector. So you are proving that innovation is the way to better quality jobs. And how do we do so? High quality education, investment in research and development for more than 3% of GDP and cutting red tape. To become more innovative, Europe must become more like Finland. Dear Petteri, your leadership is making Europe stronger, safer and ready to face not only today's challenges, but also tomorrow's challenges. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. And now, Irache Garcia Perez, President of the S&D Group.
Thank you, President. Dear Prime Minister, welcome to the European Parliament. Welcome to the House of the European democracy. The European people learn through great suffering that hate and fear are dangerous to democracy. A hate and fear that the far right has against those who they consider to be different. A hate and fear that are affecting the centre-right within the European Union, where the far right has been allowed to be part of 5 national governments and hundreds of regional and municipal governments. Dear members, Finland is another example of the regression and the decline represented by the alliance between the European People's Party and the far right. Mr. Orpo, do you believe that the best way to defend workers' rights is to promote dismissals, undermine social dialogue, and restrict the right to strike? Do you think that the best way to eradicate poverty and inequality is to reduce public spending on pensions and employment benefits, housing and parental allowances? Are you proud of your finance minister when she poses on social media with a large scissors expressing satisfaction at cutting people's income and social security? Do you feel comfortable governing with a minister who declared himself a Nazi? And this person is still a minister? Mr. Orpo, your alliance with the far right is the real threat to our democracy and to the European project. This is why the future of the European Union is at stake. And the question that we must ask our citizens is clear. What kind of Europe do we want? A Europe hostage to climate change denial, or a Europe committed to fight against it, and that makes the green transition an opportunity to create wealth? A Europe that undermines the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women, or a Europe that defends the feminist cause and the achievements of women? A Europe of the elites, or a Europe that protects workers in the face of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and protects families in time of crisis, as we did during the pandemic and the war? Dear members, in times of uncertainty and great transformation, it is not enough to simply try to resist the wave reactionary. We have to move forward. We need a European project that makes citizens proud again be a European, a project that is not guided by the fear, hate and pessimism of the right and the far right. Mr. Orpo, Mr. Weber, put an end to your alliance with those who want to destroy Europe. Let's continue building a union that will be a beacon to inspire the world through an example of integration and progress. A union with more democracy and more equality. A union that makes the social pillar a reality with decent jobs and affordable housing. A union that is more united and also more open. A union at the forefront of the fight against climate change, committed to human rights, and that places people at the centre of the digital transformation. Mr. Orpo, Mr. Weber, your only enemy is the far right. In the last century, your political family made a mistake by opening the door to the far right, and Europe and the world paid a high price. Now, let's say no to the darkness and yes to more years of hope and progress. Thank you.
I give the floor now to the President of the Renew Europe Group, Valérie Hayer. 2 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam Vice President, Prime Minister. Many of us here have always considered your country, Finland, as a serene and calm country, to the point where There are many people who forget that Finland shares the longest border in Europe with Russia, a border which, as you have recalled, was the scene of hybrid warfare with the weaponization of migrants last winter by Vladimir Putin. And with the spring, it is very likely that this will happen again, and that is unacceptable. The European Union must continue to give the necessary support, as it has already begun to do by mobilizing Frontex people. Whatever Putin does, we will stand up to him, just as we stand up to his propaganda. Propaganda that suggests that NATO is trying to establish an empire to encircle Russia. It is a lie, and Finland's accession to NATO is further proof of that. It's sovereign member states who take democratic choices to request to join our NATO alliance, and it's not NATO imposing itself on them. And if new member states wish to join NATO, of course, it will be no coincidence. It's because they understand that the world is changing and that Russia is a threat to such a point that they are ready to renounce a decades-long policy of neutrality. Prime Minister, dear colleagues, all of this shows that Finland has its true place in Europe's strategic awakening. Europe has to strengthen its policy, strengthen its role in the world where other countries are pursuing perhaps different goals to Europe on this planet. So we need a strategy that is not just climate protection and biodiversity protection, but we also have to rise to the challenges of diplomacy and defence. It is now a geopolitical priority for Finland, for all of these regions and for Europe to do so.
Now the co-president of the Green Group, Philip Lamberts.
Dear Prime Minister, welcome in the European Parliament. A pleasure to have you here. As a leader of the Green, you can imagine that I was expecting what you would say on climate. I had to wait for a while in your speech to get to that point. And the first thing that struck me is that there was a lot in your speech about competitiveness at the beginning, and then some stuff on climate, and you don't make the link. But this is the only game in town for Europe. If we do not lead this transition, China and the US will. So it's a matter of economic survival for Europe. It is not a detail or something that we can leave for later. Second, details. You say that we focused on details. Setting ourselves the goal of climate neutrality a detail, regulations to reduce emissions in transport, in buildings, in energy, details? Absolutely not. What we did is focus on the bare essentials. And there's one point I agree with you on, it's that no, you cannot achieve everything through regulation. There I totally agree. But regulation sets ourselves targets and create markets. So we need regulation. You cannot say, okay, we should dispense with it. You didn't say that. But you cannot at the same time say, we need more carrots, but then we don't want to spend money on it. I mean, what are the carrots if it's not public money? And there, again, I see really a contradiction. Doing it, if we don't want to do it through regulation, it's going to be subsidies. That's what the US are doing. That's what China is doing. They do not do anything on regulation. They do everything on subsidies. We have a more balanced approach, where we have both regulation, say sticks, and subsidies, and that's carrots. But if you say, we need less regulation, and we want less state aid, and at the same time you say we want more climate action, then something is wrong. It doesn't work. You can't have all this. Every study that looks at investment says we need between 2 and 2.5% of GDP extra on investment if we want to reach our climate targets. Of this, most agree that at least half should be public investment. There is no way around this. So this is a moment where we need to step up the public investment. And again, I would call on you rather to support these investments locally and at the European level rather than oppose them. Finally, Mr. Prime Minister, you know, I disagree with Manfred Weber on a lot of things. I disagree with Valérie Hayer on a lot of things. I disagree with Irache Garcia on a lot of things and with the far left as well. But at least we have a common base. We have a common base, and that is that Human dignity is indivisible. None of us says that some human beings are inferior or implies this. And this is where I believe that people like us should never go into alliance with people who de facto consider some human beings as inferior. That's what you did in Finland, and I'm glad, Manfred, that your colleagues in Portugal are not going to do that. Thank you.
I will give the floor now to the co-president of the ECR Group, Nicola Procaccini. Prego.
You agree only with me. Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister Orpo, it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you on behalf of the European Conservatives. From our point of view, your victory in the elections in Finland is more important than you can ever imagine. You defeated the rising star of the European Socialists, one of the main exponents of European green lunacy, an icon of the global progressive agenda. That's never happened before. And even more significant was your choice to govern alongside the Finns party, a notable member of our political family. You managed to resist the pressure of those who didn't want a coalition between an EPP party and an ECR one. If the centre-right is united, it wins everywhere in Europe, and the left knows this all too well. Unfortunately, sometimes they still manage to divide us. Do you remember the words of Pavel Haviko? When decisions are important, not everyone is able to take them. Fortunately, the left didn't in Prague, Stockholm, Rome or Helsinki. And the facts do tell us that your government is getting the economy back on its feet. It's cutting red tape, defending families, and also preserving national traditions. You have a firm, pragmatic approach to immigration, and you've made the historic choice to join NATO, which strengthens our common security on one of the most difficult borders on our continent and for our freedom. This is Europe. This is the Europe that we love and which is worth fighting for. I wish you every success.
Next, for the ID Group, Jack Madison, 2 minutes.
Arvoisa puheenjohtaja.
Madam President, colleagues, Prime Minister Orpo, I'm happy that I have the opportunity to speak here as an Estonian, a representative of Finland's neighbouring country, which culturally, historically and linguistically is close to Finland. I can't overemphasize the fact how important Finland's joining NATO is for North and Eastern Europe and for Estonia. Finland has built up its defence capabilities for decades and successfully, and its defence capabilities is one of the best in Europe. I think that Finland has applied the principle of less words and more deeds. Other European countries, including Estonia, should apply the same principle. Now that Estonia and Finland are allies in NATO, it further strengthens cooperation between our countries. I know well from history that our common neighbour, Russia, is always waiting for the moment when its neighbouring countries are weak, and we have forgotten the true nature of Russia. But for Estonia and Finland to be strong, we need cooperation, but also cooperation within the EU, because many European countries don't understand our common concerns in our countries. For example, the so-called green transition. Energy supply is essential for Estonia and Finland, but we can't produce it just from wind and solar power because it is technically impossible. Not to mention the huge amounts which the green enthusiasts are prepared to waste on this purpose, and because of which our residents' incomes will go down. We should have a realistic climate and energy policy and forget the green utopias. This also applies to immigration policy. Even though Finland's population is almost 5 times that of Estonia, we are both small countries in Europe and globally. And immigration from the Middle East and Africa threatens our existence. We can't forget that our neighbouring country, Russia, has used immigration on our borders as part of a hybrid attack. And another problem is common European migration policy which makes it difficult for us to manage immigration. I hope that Estonia and Finland will further increase its cooperation because we are very similar.
Very much listen about the Socialists and Greens because they haven't really heard about democracy, that there are elections and the people are giving the voice which kind of government they would like to have. That's why good luck and keep on the same track.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Next is Nikolai Willumsen for the Left Group. 3.5 minutes.
Dear Mr. Orpo, normally I would be happy and proud to welcome a Prime Minister from a Nordic country here in the European Parliament. But sadly, I have to say today, I'm not. Instead, I am disappointed, sad, and honestly angry to have to welcome a Nordic Prime Minister that is leading a charge against social and trade union rights in his own country. Mr. Prime Minister, the topic today is This is Europe. And I have one thing to tell you. The Europe you represent, Mr. Orpo, is not the Europe I want. And more importantly, it is definitely not the Europe citizens need. What you are doing is clearly wrong, because you are undermining what makes a Nordic welfare state strong. Your government makes it easier to fire people, and at the same time, you want to cut social welfare and protection. This will harm workers and their families. Yet sadly, it doesn't stop here. At the same time, you try to undermine the Finnish system of collective bargaining. A collective bargaining system we, on a European level, aim to increase. You are actively trying to suppress. I'm sad to say so, but that is shameful. As if this was not enough, you also want to limit the freedom of people to go on strike and protest your policies. But Prime Minister, when Finnish people protest you in the street, the solution is not to take away their possibility to strike. Instead, you should stop, reflect, and listen. Mr. Orpo, the Europe you represent is clearly a Europe for the few. A Europe that does not take care of your citizens, of our citizens, and the planet. Instead, it runs away from responsibility. Sadly, we have seen it before. Whenever the right governs with the far right, the picture is the same. Those that claim to speak for the common man quickly betray him. Those that say they have the ordinary worker's interests and concerns at heart quickly and brutally betray her. And that is exactly what is happening in Finland. That is exactly what we are seeing right now. And that is the reason that people is protesting you and your government, Mr. Prime Minister. Dear Mr. Orpo, this is Europe. And what you provide is definitely not the Europe we want. Mr. Orpo, this is Europe. It should be a Europe for the many, not just a Europe for the wealthy few. Thank you.
Next, Sirpa Pietikainen, 2 minutes.
Madam Prime Minister, you said that we need a Europe that can act and not just react. So all the best with taking that objective forward in the Council, because what we need at the moment is just that. Europe should not be surprised again. We need preparedness and a broad conception of security. If we're talking about fending off a pandemic, having enough medicines, enough food, quality food, and climate change, preventing that, and raising the level of ambition, or our preparedness for military surprises and attacks around us. We need a broad concept of security, which, as you said, takes social security into account, because as extreme movements rise and democracy is eroded, our ability to act is threatened, and that can be the worst threat facing us. We should be able to treat problems and as opportunity, and an investment union is just that. How we can transform our economy and industry, make them green, competitive, information technology, using that properly, and long-term sustainably, both socially and economically. And we can do all of that in Europe. We are the best at this globally. Let's take hold of that with both hands. Let's have competitive production and increase our prosperity and take care of Europeans.
I give the floor next to Eero Heinäluoma. 1 minute.
Hyvä nähdä. It's good to see you here, Prime Minister Orpo, in the European Parliament. Finland has always been seen as a constructive member state. You talked about a preparedness union. That's a good thing. But what about a social union? A union that defends people amidst the market forces. That is what Delors spoke about. Dialogue in the labour markets, respecting each other. Shouldn't you take forward the Corporate Sustainable Responsibility Directive, the rights of women and consumers faced with multinational companies? Shouldn't you take forward legislation which addresses the erosion of trust? We should have positive initiatives. I hope that your government will take forward socially sustainable union, but we should also talk about defence cooperation. Shouldn't we have a Finn as the EU's first defence commissioner?
Arvoisa puhemies.
Madam President, Prime Minister, the EU's pillars include a single market. This is important for an exporting country like Finland. This means that we have genuine competition within the single market. This means that we can have productivity and growth in the EU. The 4,000 billion exceptional state aid rules since 2020 are against this principle, using billions on companies, on fossil energy subsidies, for example. All of this is wrong. Thank you, Prime Minister Orpo, that you condemn this. The economy in the EU is not good. We don't have growth or investment. Improving productivity, we should take a leap forward in that. We need money for that. We should have a 3% investment in research and development, but we are far from that. We have spent 1,000 billion on the recovery plan over a few years. We should put the money into research, innovation, and supporting key technologies. This is different than state aids which erode the single market. Putin's war is a huge human tragedy, but it's also a huge material loss for Russia and Belarus. Interreg can help cooperation across borders. Now Russia is not friendly, and Interreg doesn't help municipalities on the border, so we need a new external border program. For that, we need more than the 5 billion euro granted in the context of Brexit. So strategic economy and security of supply includes sustainable use of forest. Nothing nothing other than wood can replace non-replaceable raw materials.
Blue card. 30 seconds. Maria.
Okay, I speak in my language, Romanian. It's possible to put okay.
Underneath.
Okay. Thank you.
Prime Minister, you said must on many occasions here. And I would like to ask you, from what the minister here presented, did you understand that we all have equal opportunities in the EU now? And this taking into account the fact that the Prime Minister was also the Minister of Agriculture.
Okay. I repeat for you. Now it's okay? Vă întreb, domnul prim-ministru...
So I'm asking you, the Prime Minister kept using the word must.
Okay. Repeat. Domnul prim-ministru...
So the Prime Minister kept saying this word, must, we must. And I would like to refer to one phrase here. We must have equal opportunities in the EU. So all citizens of all 27 member states. Do you believe that we really have equal opportunities? The Prime Minister is member of the Council. He was a Minister of Agriculture in his country. So how do you envisage a change in the CAP in order to grant equal opportunities for the farmers in the EU and also equal opportunities when it comes to Schengen?
Please. 30 seconds.
I didn't properly hear the start of your question, but I understood that your question was basically about how common agricultural policy should be reformed so that we have the same conditions throughout the EU. That's an important question, and I think today that is not the case. The CAP does not respond to the reality throughout Europe and the conditions for agriculture. When I look around here in Strasbourg, the fields are green here in Strasbourg, and when I go home, the fields are still covered in white. So on the hectare based aid is the same in France, in Finland. This is one example of how the current CAP does not fairly treat everybody in the EU. The CAP doesn't respect the fact that the climate change is a fact, and it raises different types of challenges for common agricultural policy.
Ville Niinistö, 2 minutes.
Madam President, I do appreciate the way our Prime Minister spoke about European defence and the need to support Ukraine. On that, we Finns are united. Europe needs to lift itself in order to stop Putin's war policy and his policy of aggression. However, our Prime Minister is a man of softly spoken words. He says, for example, that he wants to build on the Nordic labour model in Finland, when his actions are actually dismantling it. He says that he wants to keep the Finnish carbon neutrality target when they do no action to achieve it, neither when it comes to forest sinks or reducing emissions or promoting CCS that he says that they would like to promote. They just don't do it. At the same time, you gave an interview to Politico last week about the far-right party, Finns party in your government, and you said that you have moderated them by giving them ministerial posts. They are not far-right anymore, you said. Well, my question is, what party actually has changed in this government when Finland is facing unprecedented historical strikes larger than in decades, with your labour cuts and your cuts on welfare, where a middle-income earner who becomes unemployed, a woman with 2 children, can lose over 500 euros a month? Which party has changed? Have you moderated the far right, or have you yourself moved further to right to legitimise anti-egalitarian, anti-climate policies that are dismantling the Nordic labour model? That is the question that you have to answer.
I give the floor now for 2.5 minutes to Pirkko Ruohonen Lerner.
Thank you, Madam President. I, too, would like to welcome you, Prime Minister Orpo, to the European Parliament. I would like to put right what was said by the Socialist Group. And in Finland, we don't have a far-right party in government in Finland. We have a patriotic government which is doing its best to put right the previous socialist government's disastrous legacy and all the debts that it left behind that we can't deal with by taking more and more debt on and by continuing irresponsible financial management. Last autumn, Russia started a hybrid operation on Finland's border using migrants as a weapon. The Finnish government acted very decisively by closing down the eastern border. Russia has been conducting a brutal war for 3 years, and it is very unpredictable. We should be prepared for all types of scenarios. Border crossings by illegal migrants should be prevented using force if necessary. We must remember that Finland's border guards are securing the entire EU's external border. Support for Ukraine must be continued and increased further. Ukraine must win this war, and it is our duty to do everything we can so that this objective is reached. Responsible finances are important for the whole EU and for all its member states. We cannot live beyond our means. Finland, for the first time in its history, did not support granting discharge to the European Commission, and I raise my hat to that. Behind this decision was the Court of Auditors' worrying observations of substantial and widespread errors in financial management in the EU's budget. We need to take care of the European economy's competitiveness. It is essential that Finland's finances are put back on the right path. I hope that your government will be decisive in the face of political strikes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the co-president of the ID Group, Jordan Bardella. 1.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister, now our continent is being overrun by tension and a return to war. I would like to talk to you about energy within that context. Month after month, we have seen that people's ends of month are becoming difficult and the competitiveness of our economy as well. In fact, industry is moving abroad, businesses are dying, and that means we have to ask ourselves clear questions. Energy prices are one of the greatest disabilities to our economy vis-a-vis China and the US. Now, we've seen that energy prices have hit our bakeries, our farmers that are paying exorbitant prices to get beyond this. Now, we see the problems with the resilience of this and the issues of how we are setting energy prices at the European level. That has not protected citizens or businesses. And we've seen that it's actually been a catalyzer to making the situation worse. And that has been the case for business, farmers, families, and bakeries. The EU has not been able to overhaul this energy market price, and I am in great fear of a major shift of our industry abroad. We have to find our energy sovereignty, a Europe that invests in low-cost, abundant, decarbonized energy. This is a continent that gave birth to Peugeot, as Dassault, Airbus, and high-speed trains. This cannot be an industrial desert. It would be a treason for Europe.
I give the floor now to Siegfried Muresan, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, Prime Minister Orpo, welcome to the European Parliament. Thank you for a very pro-European speech, which is confirmed by your daily actions as Prime Minister. Finland is a model for many of us in many aspects. Finland is a model in terms of research, innovation, in terms of education, and Finland is globally a top 5 country when it comes to defending the rule of law, fighting against corruption, and defending the freedom of the press. And by the way, under the leadership of pro-European centre-right Prime Minister Petteri Orpo, Finland is scoring better in defending European values than any country led by a left-wing government in Europe today. We have many things to do together. Let me choose two. Security and competitiveness, two topics which the Prime Minister has touched upon. In the area of security, to protect European citizens, we will have to do more than we anticipated initially. We will have to do it faster, earlier, and for a longer period of time. We will have to pool our resources together to make sure that our troops are well equipped with the most modern, most effective equipment to be able to protect people in Europe. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your readiness to more European action in this area. And also thank you for protecting the Finnish border to the weaponized migration from the Russian Federation. Through your actions, you are protecting citizens everywhere in Europe. You are protecting a European border. Competitiveness. We need a strong economy to be able to protect our citizens. We need a strong economy to be able to safeguard our social model in Europe. We all want pensions, minimum wages, all to be safeguarded and secured. In this respect, we will have to invest in research, innovation, digitization, free trade, complete the single market, create a framework which the private sector feels comfortable to invest in. Today we heard from Prime Minister Orpo that Europe can rely on Finland, and today we're telling to you, Prime Minister, that Finland can rely on the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Hélène Fritzon, 1 minute.
Tack, fru talman.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister, yes, Finland and Sweden have so much in common, not least a Nordic labour market model. The Nordic model, which is based on dialogue and negotiation between strong and partners on an equal footing, has been a source of pride and strength in our countries. But what I'm seeing now happening in Finland makes me worried. There are attacks on the right to assembly, the right to strike, and labour rights. And I also hear that civil society organisations in Finland are warning that the cuts that the government is planning risks pushing almost 17,000 children under the poverty line. And this is at a time when people are fighting with a high cost of living. Both Finland and Sweden have governments who have chosen to work with the right extreme wing. Prime Minister, my encouragement to you is to work together to create cohesion and understanding at this sort of time, rather than confrontation. Thank you.
Now to Niels Torvalds, 2 minutes. Yeah, there's a blue card, Petteri Sarvamaa. Sorry, Hélène? You accept it from Mr. Sarvamaa? Thank you.
Jag kommer att tala engelska och lite svenska.
I might speak English or Swedish.
First of all, I have to remind the honourable members that when we had a socialist prime minister, our instruction to EPP was not to make this a discussion about domestic politics.
My question to you, honourable member Fritzon, is why did you do the exact opposite here today?
Fru talman.
Madam President, thank you very much for that question. We are here in the European Parliament at a juncture where there is crisis and war in Europe. Every single member state's actions have an important impact in how our coordination and cooperation works. Hence, it is extremely pertinent to point out that when we strengthen cooperation between our member states and within our member states, if we're going to include right-wing and extreme right forces in our government, we open up our European democratic values to scrutiny, and that is why I'm speaking about what is going on in Sweden and Finland. Thank you.
Now is Nils Torvalds, 2 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, Vice Chair, President of the Commission, hyvä Petteri.
Dear Petteri. This place is a bit like the Tower of Babel. Fortunately, we have interpreters who make our confused speeches almost understandable. But I will challenge them today. There is a word in Finland which equates to meaning feeling like an orphan. I feel like an orphan when I see how Finland and Europe are doing in terms of competition. We are well behind the US and China. And one of the reasons for this is that we have an administrative burden which is sometimes too big. And therefore, we should see what will happen in the future when everybody are putting forward their Christmas gift lists for the next Commission. The task of the next Commission is to bring about a framework of legislation. Mr. Bardella was talking about long lists of things that should be done and should not be done. But we have framework legislation where we can create guidelines and manage the future. But this but the lack of this, which makes me feel like an orphan. The word orphan in Finnish is Orpo. It's got nothing to do with the Prime Minister. But I can't resist the temptation to play with words because that's our main task. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torvalds. Next is Anna Deparnay-Grunenberg. 1 minute.
Dear Chair, Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Orpo, dear colleagues. Last October, you, Mr. Orpo, sent a letter to our President von der Leyen raising concerns about the pressure on forest and forestry due to EU legislation. And you asked to take more time. Already today, 3/4 of Finland's forest habitats are threatened. Already today, Finnish forests became a net emitter of carbon dioxide instead of a sink. And it's not EU legislation that is responsible for the bad state of Finnish forests. We cannot afford to take more time. To use your own words, we need a union that acts, also fighting the climate and biodiversity crisis together. And our European forests are our strongest allies in this fight. So I ask you today, what is your plan to improve the state of Finnish forests? How can Finland contribute to a successful monitoring law that is upcoming now? And when will the big clear cuts in Finland that are still practiced in 80% of the forest finally be stopped? Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. Next is Zdzisław Krasnodębski. 1 minute, please.
Yes, thank you, President. Prime Minister, in this week, I was in Helsinki, a beautiful city, and in our talks with local politicians, we were able to see how realistic the current government is. And obviously, there's the whole question of the protection of borders and migration and the threats from Russia. Obviously, Finland is not one of the largest countries in the European Union, and they've got large armed services. So at the moment in the European Union, the idea obviously is to strengthen NATO, not weaken it. And we have to ensure, of course, that our member states help build up governance in the European Union. And I must say, it was very pleasant to listen to your words, your presentation, because they were very realistic. And I'm very much hoping that we can move towards the next term in the same spirit.
1 minute.
Prime Minister, illegal immigration is used as a weapon against Europe's borders. We've seen this in Finland, where Russia, with their aggression, has tried to send illegal migrants to your country. We've seen it in the Mediterranean. We've seen it in Turkey against Greece and Bulgaria. That's something we should take seriously in Europe, because we can't rely on our neighbours, always have the best intentions in mind when we use these instruments against us. Therefore, it is necessary that in the EU we take things into our own hands and solve the challenges around illegal migration once and for all on our continent, and not count on the fact that we have friendly neighbours, because history shows, as the situation in Russia and Turkey shows us, that we can't rely on that. Let's take it seriously now, and let's do something about it, both in Finland and the rest of the EU.
Thank you. Next, there's a blue card. From whom? Mr. Fulsang. Oh, up there. 538.
Tack.
Thank you. Yes, it's interesting, Anders Vistisen, your criticism of things not being done properly, and your criticism of the EU and everybody else. We know that sort of thing from you. But what is your suggestion as how we can improve things here? The Danish People's Party is something that the Danish Socialists has copied. That is the Australian model, and we have Social Democrats in Denmark, and we have a small minority who want to do something about illegal migration. But I think there's a good reason to praise the Danish Social Democrats. That's why my colleagues in Rassemblement National, and they have praised how the Danish People's Parties have influenced migration policy, and so it could be a model of how things could be in the EU, of how when the far right, when the right influences migration policy. So your approach actually is a little bit soft for my taste.
Statsminister. Prime Minister Orpo, Petteri. Finland is and remains Sweden's closest partner, a partnership which is now being strengthened now that both of our countries finally have become members in NATO. From the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank you and Finland for the support that you have proffered during the course of this journey. Kiitos. Thank you. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation in Europe where war is raging. Both of our countries now have a central role in not just providing military and economic support to Ukraine, but also, I believe, we need to be crystal clear in these times that it is not Ukraine that is to wave the white flag. It is not Ukraine that is to be forced to the negotiating table. It is Putin who should leave Ukraine, and Europe should be defended. Thank you.
Adesso Brando Benifei. 1 minute. Now I'd like to give the floor to Brando Benifei.
Presidente Orpo.
President Orpo, the idea of Europe that your government has presented is the opposite of what we need. An alliance of the center-right that gives in to the far-right. That is what we have seen in Finland. Now, that might be an approach that might please Meloni or Salvini, but really it would create isolation and weakness for Europe. We shouldn't forget the racist, homophobic statements when we have the former Ministry of Economy had to tender his resignation because of Nazi comments. Now, when it comes to social security and working and labor laws, we've seen that people have come to the streets to protest. We have seen that there are those who are really looking to the far right. And in the upcoming elections, we have to make sure that Europe stays the course. Let us not have the far right dictate the policy of Europe, but rather make European policy be a veritable one. Thank you.
Madam President, Prime Minister Orpo,
Thank you, Prime Minister, for being here with us today, and thank you for an excellent speech. The three main priorities you highlighted, strengthening Europe's strategic competitiveness, improving our comprehensive security, and promoting a clean transition, they are precisely the sectors on which the European Union must focus in. We must create a Europe that encourages companies to innovate and invest in Europe. We need to strengthen our own capacity, both in economy and in security, so that Europe has the ability to act in all situations. Finland is a good example of a model of comprehensive security where citizens, companies and the public sector work closely together to ensure preparedness, resilience and security of supply. Your proposal for a preparedness union is indeed an excellent initiative that should be taken forward. Mr. Prime Minister, I fully support your words about Ukraine. The European Union must bolster up our support for Ukraine. Concrete decisions and action is needed. We must help Ukraine win the war.
Thank you very much. Ms. Virkkunen, next, and finally is Petra Kumpula-Natri. 1 minute.
Dear Chair, first of all, there is no opposition here in the Parliament. We are here for the different groups and for the citizens. I read the EPP promise for the next elections. It says it wants to defend the workers' rights and wants to have fair income. How do you, Petteri Orpo, take that EPP message to Council, and is it this fake? We have people on the streets now, there's big strikes going on, the government is cutting benefits, cutting rights for the political strikes, and at the same time making benefits for our income level, the most rich one, and cutting the poor. And I'm very worried that 17,000 more poor children is in the programme. The previous government was in the time of the growing economy, and this government takes more loans than the previous one. So this is my call for the Council what to do. On the defence, on the eastern border, these issues are national, and I welcome very much the strong words of the government. That has to be taken there. And finally, something was missing, rule of law. You didn't take that up. Is it because of the MEPs here? They voted against. Your ministers and speakers and others are saying that this is not important. It is the Hungary who have their national rights. Please be strong there. Finnish voice is needed. The processes started last term. They are vital for the democracy as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kumpula-Natri. And now, Prime Minister, I give you the floor to respond.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you for your attention and contribution. Thank you for excellent European and domestic debate. Few comments on your remarks. First, Mr. Weber, thank you for your strong support. On NATO, you mentioned it is important that today in Finland we are united. Almost all Finnish members of Finland's parliament support our membership in NATO, and together in Finland we are building up a strong NATO Finland at this moment. And I'm proud of it. Madam Garcia Perez, and for many others also, there is no right-wing, far-right parties in my government. Finnish government is pro-rule of law. It's pro-democracy. It's pro-equal gender rights. It's pro-Ukraine, pro-European Union. And many of you were worried about the reforms we are doing in Finland. But we have to do those reforms because in 15 years our economy has not grown. And we are going to lose our welfare in Finland. That's why we are reforming our economy. We are reforming labour market, social security system, taxation, because our target is to create 100,000 jobs to the Finnish people so we can take care of all Finnish people and take care of our welfare state, education, healthcare, etc. This is clear. Madam Higher, thank you for your strong words on our common security. And Arctic, it is very important issue. Mr. Lambert, thank you for your very wise words. There is a strong link between growth and climate. It's clear. Green transition will provide opportunities to our businesses. And we do need regulation, but we need better regulation. And I want to also mention that we use €1 billion to development and research more in this period, because we need new innovations because of climate. Some words in Finnish. Viro ja Suomi ovat.
Estonia and Finland are very close neighbours. Our cooperation in Baltic security, border security, energy are very important for us.
We are at fantastic summer.
We have fantastic cooperation with the Swedish government. We're forming our labour market along the Swedish model lines.
Herra Heinäluoman ehdotus.
Mr. Heinäluoma, your proposal on a defence commissioner supported by Mrs. von der Leyen is something we support.
My main message for this chamber are clear and urgent. Firstly, we cannot afford to hesitate. The situation in Russia is not just a momentary crisis, it's a test of our resolve and our foresight. If we do not act decisively against the aggression now, we are efficiently inviting future challenges to our borders and to the very ideals we hold dear. President Putin's ambitions will not be curbed by inaction. He will emboldened by it. Secondly, time is of the essence. Our words must now be matched by tangible action. We need to accelerate our defence production capabilities immediately. All these efforts require time that is slipping through our fingers even as we speak. The time is now. By working together, we can multiply our effectiveness. Naturally, bilateral help is needed, but the EU must also work collectively. The unity displayed by the European Union has been commendable. However, it is now imperative that we embark the next phase of our collective journey. Our security cannot hinge on the outcomes of elections in the United States. And thirdly, and perhaps most critically, this effort requires a substantial financial investment. As politicians, we are acutely aware of the numerous important and valuable demands on our budgets. For the past 3 decades, European nations have enjoyed the luxury of securing their defence at a relatively low cost. Regrettably, that era has come to an end. The stark reality we have faced today is that our safety and the preservation of our democratic values come with a higher price tag. This is not merely about allocating funds for defence. It's about ensuring the robustness of our continent's economic foundation. Fourthly, Europe needs to be stronger on the world stage. The European Union, our way of thinking and our values are essentials in the current geopolitical landscape, as democracy and authoritarians compete our dominance. The EU needs to show its strength globally, especially as China and Russia spare to their own ideas and narratives. We need a stronger European foreign policy, and we need to make it more effective using qualified majority voting in important areas. Dear friends, a strong economy is the bedrock of our security. It enables us to invest in the advanced technologies and capabilities needed to protect our citizens and uphold our way of life. Moreover, a vibrant economy enhances our global influence, allowing us to shape a world order that reflects our values and our interests. Only when our economic base is healthy can we efficiently protect the climate, improve our security and defend ourselves. This is why we need strategic competitiveness. This means building our long-term competitiveness by focusing on our own strengths, deepening the internal market, boosting innovation and focusing on market-based solutions. This is a critical moment. We must be willing to make the hard choices that safeguard our future. Investing in our defence is not just a matter of national security. It is a commitment to the stability and prosperity of our Union. It is about ensuring that Europe remains a beacon of hope and freedom in an increasingly turbulent world. Let us therefore approach this challenge now just with the seriousness it demands, but with a sense of shared purpose. Our collective future, the legacy we leave for the next generation, depends on the decisions we make today. Let us invest together in that future, in our security and in the enduring strength of our European Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Orpo. Thank you to all the colleagues who participated in the debate. We will stop for a few seconds while we bid farewell to the Prime Minister, unless he wants to stay for the voting session, and otherwise we'll go straight to the votes. Okay, let's move straight to the votes, dear colleagues. I have 2 points of order before we start. First is Elisabetta Gualmini. Aspetta, Elisabetta, perché?
Wait, Elisabetta.
5.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Grazie, cara Presidente.
Thank you, dear President. Unfortunately, this morning we saw an unacceptable example of propaganda that is skewed to Russia from de Graaf during the debate on Ukrainian children that have been forcefully deported to Russia, 20,000 roughly. And we must condemn this type of propaganda that's fake. We heard that it was Zelensky that should be taken to the International Criminal Court, along with the fact that the Western countries are actually assisting these types of actions and assisting Ukraine in indoctrination in transgender propaganda and female genital mutilation. This is absolutely unacceptable. The European Parliament has always defended Ukraine and the children from Ukraine against the invasion that can be considered a ferocious tyranny, authoritarian at that. We cannot accept pro-Russian propaganda against children, and this we condemn. Thank you.
Onorevole Gualmini. We will look at the exact wording used. Vice President who was chairing, I think it was Madame Sharantsova, cut off the speaker then, so we will also do the procedure. But thank you for making this point. Next point of order is Ms. Laurence Farang. Allez-y.
Merci, Présidente.
Thank you, President. On the 7th of January 2015, there was an attack on Charlie Hebdo. Several people were killed just for drawing a cartoon. And we saw that the person who drew this cartoon, Coco, had to be placed under police protection for own good. Then we saw a cartoon again about Gaza recently. Coca now has been subject of massive violent campaign on social media, and even worse, there